Woohoo! Awesome.
I can see you all.
Great. Well, as I was saying, we're really excited to have the opportunity to chat with both Bethany and Kim here today. And a big shout out and thank you to Philip Lee at Readers to Eaters for helping to make this happen. So I'd like to start by introducing our guests here. After much ado, Kim, whom we have here on the left side of or my screen at least, has a BS in environmental science from SUNY Buffalo. She's the managing director of the actual bread lab in Washington State, where she is standing right now. That the bread lab
Yeah,
sits at Washington State
if that's okay.
University in Mount Vernon, where her work includes grant writing, field research, community outreach, and connecting farmers with bakers, chefs, and food companies that are interested in working with unique grains. The best part of her work in the lab is the mix of science, farming, and baking that makes better food for people and better crops to enrich our soil. She was raised on a small farm in New York State and has a degree in environmental science. And then Bethany, on the right hand of my screen, has a PhD from Washington State University and an MS from Colorado State University, both in plant breeding and genetics. And she's also worked in international agricultural research and development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Currently, Bethany works at Cornell University, where she focuses on bioinformatics and international collaboration. When she was young, she wanted a career in baking and cooking, and later she became fascinated with science and specialized in agriculture. So welcome both of you. Thanks for joining me. I also would love to share in regards to the book, The Bread Lab, which is an amazing children's book that Bethany and Kim wrote, which we're going to talk more about. Big Green is thrilled to partner with Arnold Organic, Brownberry Organic, and Wheat Organic to offer 5 educators free copies of the Bread Lab for themselves and every student in their class. Published by our friends at Readers to Eaters, The Bread Lab and The Bread Lab at Washington State University. This story captures the step-by-step process and delicious aromas, sensations, sights, and sounds of bread making. So you can enter for a chance to win a book at biggreenathome.org by April 31st. So we'll be posting that link after we finish up here today. But if you are a teacher interested in getting books for your classroom, this is a really great opportunity. So we're super excited about that. Well, without further ado, welcome Bethany and Kim. Where are you both calling in from today? I'd love to hear where you are right now.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having us today. So I'm at the actual real bread lab in Burlington, Washington. So we're about 60 miles north of Seattle.
Awesome. There it is.
I am in my basement where I have my desk set up, and I'm living in Portland, Oregon.
Great. Awesome. Well, we have 2 folks in the Northwest. I'm calling in from Boulder, Colorado. That's where we are based for Big Green. Great. Well, I'd love to learn a little bit more about this picture book, The Bread Lab. Could you tell us more what it's about?
Sure.
I'm always going to let you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So the Bread Lab, it's about Iris. She's a 10-year-old girl, and she spends the day with her Aunt Mary, who is a plant scientist, but she also really enjoys baking. So she brings her sourdough starter along with her, and the story takes you through their day together as they bake using the sourdough starter, making 100% whole wheat loaf of bread. But along with the baking that they do, they have a lot of conversations about flour and wheat and the farmers that grow wheat and nutrition and science.
Awesome.
I don't have much to add to that, but I think just in general, it's about exploring how science is part of our everyday lives and, taking it out of a formal lab or a formal office and just thinking about how science can be part of our everyday lives and in a fun way.
That's great. What inspired you both to write the book?
Yeah, I think just like Bethany said, we wanted to kind of bring all the concepts that we bring together here at the lab and to make that connection between farming and baking and science in a way that was fun for kids. And also, the hope was that some of those conversations that Iris and her Aunt Mary have in the book would turn into conversations that kids and their parents would have.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the bread lab, the WCU bread lab, the actual one, also likes to explore a lot of different avenues in pursuing science and communicating science. And I think writing a children's book was kind of just adding to that multidisciplinary kind of approach that the lab likes to take. And for me personally, I was very, as a student then, I was pretty limited at that point in my studies of um, who I communicate to. And I was kind of in this small community of research and publication. And to me, it was a nice experience to get to broaden that kind of bubble of communication.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
I,
like that's pretty unique to
yeah.
have the experience of writing a
I
children's book.
was just going
Yeah,
to say, I think Bethany's probably one of the, maybe not one of the only PhD students, but during her studies was able to write a children's book as part of her program.
that's pretty cool. Yeah. And especially about something so cool as the Bread Lab, I just feel like I haven't experienced a lot of children's books that talk about something like that. So that's really neat. So could you tell us some more about the actual Bread Lab? So Kim, you're standing there right now. So
Yep.
could you tell us
Yes.
a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I'm here in the bread lab. This is kind of the lab proper, but our program, so we're really a plant breeding program at Washington State University. So Washington State University is actually in Eastern Washington, and like I said, we're about an hour north of Seattle. So we're part of a research and extension center within the university. So I'm here in the lab today, but our work really starts out in the field. So we plant every year. We plant thousands of varieties of small grains.
Wow.
Wheat, barley, rye, and buckwheat are mainly what we work with. And we observe them during the growing season to see which ones do the best in the field.
Hmm.
Because we want it to work for farmers. So we want something that's going to be disease resistant and something that's going to yield well so that it's successful for the farmer and they can be profitable. So that's the first part. So once we figure out which varieties do well in the field, then we bring them here to the lab where we do analytical testing and we bake with them because not every wheat is meant to be bread, right?
Hmm.
Some varieties are better for cookies or maybe for pasta or for pancakes. So we do test baking to figure out what the best use is. And we also do a lot of tasting because we want something that's delicious. Um, and we grow a lot of really unique varieties of grain. That's sort of what separates us from maybe some different wheat breeding programs. And so what that means is that when you think about big areas of the United States that grow a lot of really high acreage of wheat, like Kansas or North Dakota, or even here in Eastern
Hmm.
Washington, they are not growing the varieties that we're working on. So ours
Hmm.
are very unique, and that's really helpful for the farmer because they're growing unique grains, and that enables them to sell to a unique market.
Wow, that's super interesting. Bethany, is there anything you wanted to add there as well?
Um, I think from a student's perspective, it's also a place for people and students who are interested in agricultural science and the sciences to explore not only the formal study of plant breeding and genetics, which is what I studied, but also how that field interplays with the broader community and
Hmm.
with other disciplines and um, take a more broad perspective than you might normally, which can be a benefit for some students. Some students like to focus more, so it really depends.
That's awesome. Well, we had a question come in from someone here actually who's listening in today. They're wondering about the inspiration of the main character I have the book right here so I can show the pictures of the characters. Is the girl you or is the aunt you? And that it's such a wonderful relationship. So they were curious.
Well,
Who's
the
who's you?
Aunt Mary is definitely Bethany.
I think it's all just this kind of this nebulous kind of thing that grew as we wanted to have the characters be women and girls in science and this intimate
Hmm.
relationship between the aunt and the niece. And so I don't think it's necessarily either of us, but I think there's traits of each of us that kind of emerged into the two characters.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for answering that question. So I've heard about something called the approachable loaf. Could you tell me more about what that is and why it was created?
Yeah, sure. So the approachable loaf is a soft sliced sandwich style of bread. We came up that has only 7 ingredients. It's 60%, at least 60% whole wheat, and costs $6 or less. So we share that formula with other bakers throughout the country in a group that we call the Bread Lab Collective. If you go to our website, you can check that out and see if there's any bakeries in your area that are selling this loaf. And we came up with this formula. I mean, there's a lot of sandwich loaves out there, and
Mhm.
people, you think, well, why do we need another sandwich loaf? But when you go to the grocery store and you see all those different loaves of bread that you can choose from, a lot of them really aren't as healthy as maybe they seem. And they have a lot of ingredients in there,
Mhm.
and many of those ingredients are non-food. Some breads have up to 25 ingredients, and that those non-food ingredients, they're not in there to benefit the eater. They're in there to benefit the producer. And we just wanted a loaf of bread that was nutritious and delicious and had more whole wheat in it, and really just something that we would feel good about giving to our kids.
That's awesome. Um, so someone is asking whether there is a gluten-free, um, they say gluten-free mix, but I guess they mean maybe like a recipe that you have that's a gluten-free bread recipe.
Yeah, we get that question a lot, actually. And we understand there's a lot of people that have gluten intolerance and certainly understand that celiac is a serious disease. But for us as wheat breeders, and here in a lab where we're surrounded by wheat and we're surrounded by flour, it just doesn't make practical sense for us to work on a gluten-free product.
That makes sense.
So,
For the approachable look too, I think it also emerged from the perspective of part of the lab being deeply embedded in plant breeding and genetics,
Hmm.
and that one of the main objectives of plant breeding and plant genetics and the agricultural sciences is to get well adapted varieties to farmers so that they grow well in their environments and on their farms. And that in turn makes wheat or whatever the crop is more affordable and of higher quality for
Hmm.
consumers. And so it should really mean that you're getting a more affordable loaf, not a more expensive loaf.
right.
Hmm. Great.
Yeah,
That's great context.
that's exactly right.
And
Uh,
I'm going to say, I'll let Kim start on the next question. I have to run upstairs and
Okay.
switch, like, say goodbye to my sitter, and I'll be
okay.
right back.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, so Kim, you're managing director at the Bread Lab. And well, when Bethany comes back, we can talk more about her work as a researcher there. But I was wondering if you could tell us more about your role at the Bread Lab and what you've been up to since writing the book. Like, what does your job look like for some of the young people listening today?
Yeah. So as the managing director, I do a lot of the background stuff that just makes the lab run every day. Um, but I also get to fill in when there's work needed in other areas. So some days I am at my desk on my computer answering emails and um, sending out bills and paying bills and writing grants. I spend a lot of time writing grants, managing our calendar, organizing tours. But other days I'm out in the field and I'm helping to plant and I'm weeding. And then other days I'm here in the lab where I do some of the analytical testing and sometimes I even get to bake, which is really fun part of my job that it sort of
Yeah,
covers so many different areas of what we work in.
that's really cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
So Bethany, I was just asking Kim about her job, and I know you had been a researcher at the Bread Lab, and now you're doing other exciting work around plant science. So for the young people listening today, I was just wondering if you could talk more about what you do, about your job and what it entails.
Um, okay. No, that's okay. I'm just trying to switch my mind. And I missed what Kim said, but so I'm just going off. So I haven't been at the Bread Lab for about 3 years. So
Hmm.
I can talk a little bit about what it was like when I was at the lab and as a
Hmm.
student, and then I'll just very briefly talk about what I do now. But one of the really awesome things about I'm promoting plant breeding and genetics here. Genetics is you get to work in a lot of different environments, and by that I mean you're not only in a lab or you're not only at a computer, but you get to be in a lab, maybe doing analytical testing and quality, or like where Kim is doing baking tests. And you can be in a greenhouse working on um, making crosses. And then you can be out in the field during the growing season and looking at your plants and taking data. And then you can be back at your desk reading literature and writing. So it's really for people who like to be kind of doing many different things and putting it all together into a research project. I think it's a really great field. And for people who like to be outside and inside, and then also talking with people who are directly impacted by the science. So if it
Hmm.
whether or that end of the science and research, or if it's on the end of someone who's going to be using the flower. Um, and so that was what it was like to be a student. It was really fun, a lot of hard work for everyone, but it's great and it's fun. I'm sad that I'm not a student anymore. And so what I'm doing today, so when I graduated, I was, I don't know, 8 months pregnant or something. So I graduated and I took some time off to be with my son, and I started consulting because I worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for a while, so I did some research with them, um, looking at how to optimize plant breeding programs so they're most efficient and can have the greatest impact with limited resources. And I'm just starting a new job with Cornell where I'm going to be doing similar work, but working with plant breeders and international research collaborations to apply bioinformatics to the plant breeding field. So I won't be in the field or the greenhouse, at least right away, which is really sad. But still a kind of big picture meets focused research type of work.
Awesome. Very cool.
So in general, now I'm on a computer all the time. So for young people trying to decide their career paths, I think one thing is what environment do you like to be in? And do you like to be on your feet, using your hands, at a computer? There's all sorts of different things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's cool to hear about all the different work that you both do because it helps us break some stereotypes we might have of what it means to be a scientist, and that there are all different ways that you can take part in the field. So that's really neat. Um, I'm curious about, what it's like to be a woman in science and how that might have influenced your career path or your perspective.
Well, I'll go. And I feel like I'm not, I don't feel right saying that I'm a
Yes,
scientist,
you are.
but
Yes, you
I do
I knew you
work,
were going to say that.
I do work in science, in an academic setting where I get to be the support system for young women such as Bethany that are just starting on the path of to their career as scientists. So that's really important for me, a part of my job that I love because we have wonderful students that come here and they're inspirational for me.
That's awesome.
You can see right there the stereotype work at play where Kim is denying herself the label of scientist.
Well, I know,
You
but
don't
I
have to
feel like
have
I don't have a P. You
you
were
don't
on a
have to have a formal degree to be a scientist. And you do have a degree in science.
That's true. That's true. I do. And that is a great point too, because you can, for some people, going to school for a long period of time and going into a PhD program just maybe isn't an option, but you can still be in science without having that PhD because I have a bachelor's. So there's lots of different options to be in the science field. And, science is everywhere. It's all around us.
Yeah. And you can gain experience in formal education or just by getting into the field and working. So both
Right.
Yeah.
work.
There's a question that came in from one of our listeners here that I think is connected to this. They were asking how the Bread Lab partners with the community, and I feel like Kim, a lot of your work is doing that, right? Is partnering with the community and having conversations and connecting people. And do you feel like
Yeah.
that's
For
true?
sure. So, working with the farming community is sort of one aspect of things. And then because of the work that we do, there's a flour mill right around the corner. There's a malting facility right down the street. So that's like one part of the community. But then in addition to that, we really try and do a lot of outreach. Unfortunately, over the last year, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to do that, but we like to get out into the community to talk about the work that we do because not everyone can come here. So I go to schools and do demonstrations and talk about our work. We work with food banks. I've done demonstrations at food banks before where, the mill that I talked about, they may donate some flour and I'll go there and I'll do a demonstration and have a recipe that we can hand out to clients, and they're printed in English and in Spanish, and then everything, and we make really simple things like scones or muffins, and everything that they need for the recipe is available to them that day. We go to libraries, so
Mhm.
yeah, we really try and get out as much as we can, and I know we're all really looking forward to the day where we can do that again, which I
Yes.
think will be soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, well, Bethany, do you have anything to add in terms of your perspective as a woman working in the field of science?
Um, is that what we were just talking about?
Right, that was prior to the last question.
Okay, sorry. Um, I don't know. I think there are times when, being a woman in science, I guess it feels like you're just a person in science. And there's times when you definitely feel like it might be harder for you.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I don't want to project my own experiences, but if you look at the research that looks at these types of issues, women are underrepresented in the scientists, and they do face stereotypes and anywhere from microaggression to full aggression in the field. And I wouldn't want to deny that exists to push women into science, because it's there, and it's not
Hmm.
just stereotypes. There's, you know, stereotypes depending on people's sexual orientation, how you identify as your gender and race, and it's real and it's there, and it's a lot of, I think, making sure you're doing the work you love and being willing to persist and work hard and also try to change the system so it's better.
Awesome.
Sorry, that's an
Yeah,
awkward
no,
answer.
thank you for sharing that. That's great. Someone did just ask whether or not your work, so both of you, incorporates soil science or carbon sequestration or not. So someone is curious.
Yeah, certainly we work with soil scientists, and also part, as I was saying, the unique varieties that we grow, part of that is that genetically there's a lot of variation in those varieties. So what that does is it enables the field of wheat from a variety that we have developed, it will adapt to its environment. So we think
Mhm.
that's really important for an environment that's changing, a climate that's changing, however you want to look at it. Because if we plant a variety, that same variety that we plant here versus maybe planting it in Oregon versus planting it in Pennsylvania, it's going to adapt to its variety. So in each location, they're going to be a little bit different.
Mhm.
So for the future of farming, that is really important. And then as far as carbon sequestration, we do work with farmers and are encouraging farmers to reduce tillage, certainly in a system where that makes sense.
Mhm. Awesome.
And a lot of the big picture of wheat and other grains being grown in the Skagit Valley is being part of those rotations to help with
Mhm.
soil quality and structure. And I think that's some of how the plant breeding program started and originated there. So it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, exactly. Because so there's like in Eastern Washington, those are wheat farmers. Here in Skagit Valley, we work with a lot of farmers, but they're farmers that grow wheat, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. We grow about 80 different crops here. So they plant wheat and barley and rye as a rotation crop versus in Eastern
Mhm.
Washington, that is their main crop.
Okay, got it. Um, Thank you. Well, we just got another question about, can you give us some examples of how you work with chefs and bakers or school food as well?
School food is a tough one. We've tried working with some local school districts, and a lot of their budgets are so tight, it's really difficult for them to go outside of that. That said, during when things shut down, we were working with the King Arthur Baking School, making the approachable loaf, and were able to donate those to our local school district here because they were still doing grab and go lunches. So that was a huge success. So we're hoping someday there can be a bakery in the area that can make the approachable loaf that will be able to sell it to school districts at a price that they can afford.
Hmm.
And chefs and bakers, we work with chefs and bakers locally and really throughout the entire United States. So when we're open, this is a place where chefs and bakers can come and experiment here with the grains that we have and the flour that we have here. And that enables them. We have kind of equipment that is similar to a professional bakery, just on a smaller scale. So they can leave their bakery and have not disrupt their production, but come here and maybe experiment with some new varieties of wheat and new formulas.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're really excited to be able to see the inner workings of the Bread Lab today. And Bethany, I would love your perspective as well as Kim kind of shows us around with what we have there. So both of you, could you tell us more about what you have there in front of you, Kim?
Oh, sure. So we're going to show some of this different seeds now. So this is a really good example of the different grains that we're growing. So most wheat is either white or red is how it's classified. And as you can see here, we have blues and browns and purples and really kind of every other color in between.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was laughing because I was having this kind of student-based fear that Kim was going to quiz me on my
Yeah. Well, now that
seed
you mention it,
identification.
Bethany, and then, yeah, here's just some other examples of wheat that we have. And then I have pictures of the flour that's made
Cool.
from that wheat. And most of the flour we use here at the lab, we like to use 100% whole wheat. That's just, we like the way it tastes and it's more nutritious. And so whatever we bake is with 100% whole wheat. And we do everything from pizza to cookies to cakes to scones, and it's all 100% whole wheat. And if you didn't know that it was 100% whole wheat, you'd never be able to tell the difference. So we really like to promote that for people to, even if you don't want to do 100% whole wheat, even just like add a little bit of whole wheat into a recipe that calls for all-purpose flour.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Someone just shared here that there is I think a school in Washington, Coopville, Washington, that is partnering with a local bakery to make the approachable loaf for the district's bread needs. Oh, so it's for a district. All local whole wheat flour. So that's pretty cool. It can be done.
Yeah, that's great. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
that's
Yeah, I don't run the collective. Janine
yeah.
Johnson, who she's actually doing the camera work for me here, she runs the collective. So I'll have to ask her about that. I'm sure she is aware of that, but that's great.
Wait,
Yeah.
you have your own camera person?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
You have
That's
to come back to
awesome.
the lab, Bethany.
Well, you invite me.
Um, Bethany, is there anything else you want to share about the what's there at the Bread Lab, where Kim is, if you want to, add anything as well to what she shared.
No, I mean, I just think if you think about the diversity of the seeds you're looking at, that you can see, you can also think that there's this genetic variation also that might not be visible in the form of a seed. And so a lot of what they do there and what plant breeders do and geneticists do is try to look at that variation in the plant form. So going out in the field or the greenhouse and trying to classify that variation.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you for showing us some of the varieties that you have there and for giving such interesting answers to our questions today. And thank you so much to those listening today for sending in questions too. It's awesome to have an interactive audience. Great. Well, is there anything else you both want to share today before we finish up?
No, I would just say that, I encourage kids to always be curious and to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And not listen to other people if they tell you you're not smart because you're a woman or whatever. I mean, it's not
Exactly.
just science, it's just in general. Any of the disciplines where we as humans stereotype those disciplines as requiring more smarts or more brilliance, those are always the fields that women are underrepresented in. And so even things not science, it's, economics or philosophy where women are underrepresented. And it is unscientific to say that women are not brilliant.
Here, here.
Well said.
And any other group. It's just,
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you both so
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank
This was
you.
fun.
Sorry about all the technical issues in the
No
beginning.
worries, no worries. Hey, we all made it here. We're here. We were able to connect, which is great. And thanks again to Readers to Eaters for facilitating
Yes.
the connection. If you're interested in learning more about the actual Bread Lab, you can check them out online at thebreadlab.wsu.edu or follow them at WSU Bread Lab on Instagram. We'll have this interview was recorded today, so it'll be posted on our social media platforms, and you can share it with others. And as a reminder, we'll post the sign up link for the Bread Lab book giveaway. So you get this really cool book for your class, and you can learn all about the Bread Lab, and there's even a great recipe in the back to make your own bread. So really great if you're a teacher. We'll post the sign up link for the giveaway after this. And thanks again to our partner Arnold Organic, Brownberry Organic, and Ora Reed Organic for making this happen, this book giveaway happen. So awesome. Well, thank you both so much again.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.